Welcome to Mindless Entertainment. It is I, Jesse Milestone, coming to you on this Friday with both good news and bad news.
I have a really bad feeling about this.
Where people were just walking around, just jizzing force all over the place. He looks like he has been drinking soy from his mother's teat. Wrap yourselves in, guys, because we are gonna get mean!
I got him! Great kid! Don't get cocky!
Welcome to Mindless Entertainment. My name is Jesse Milestone. I am your God Empress and fearless leader of the Mindless Mob. And, well, if you've been following any of the fan response to the new Rings of Power by Amazon, their Lord of the Rings TV show, well, you've probably been inundated with your fair share of outrage and doom and gloom. You might even be sick of it. Extra sick of it because that's all there is these days, right? Every single time they go to adapt one of our beloved franchises, before we even have a chance to see what it's going to look like, everyone's screaming, freaking out, going, as if it's the end of the bloody world. We could watch this and find it's the greatest thing ever, or that we may hate it, but who knows? We should give it a fair shake, right? And so how is this time any different than just a bunch of fans being preemptively outraged because we're worried that something we love is going to get taken away? Someone's going to play with their shiny toy and break it. Well, it is different. And I'd like to take you through how, and all I needed to do to understand how very different this is from many others is drop on my vast love, my own personal long-standing obsession with Lord of the Rings, and then this one particular interview from Vanity Fair that they dropped with as showrunners Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne the day after the Super Bowl Rings of Power trailer aired, and they put on display. They couldn't put on display more clearly why. They are so ill-fit to be doing this project and so uncaring about the source material. And the source material, that's where we come to our first real big difference here, right? Normally when the fans squabble and argue and want to split hairs about, well, this is canon and that's canon, this is faithful and that's faithful, you're dealing with something, especially in a situation where the original creator, the author himself, is no longer with us, is dead. Tolkien has been in the ground for a while now. So we can't go to ask him, but that's great because we don't have to. Because Tolkien did that job for us. This is not like another work where you just can't ever know because the person who created it is gone and can't speak on it. This isn't like something like Star Wars even, where the EU was created by so many different hands and so many different people that did have a Lucas nod of approval at one point and now is, moved on to something else. And so you can split hairs over what is canon, what is original, what is faithful, what is not faithful. That's really not the case with Tolkien. Tolkien has as much or more richness, depth, places to go as Star Wars' own EU. And it was all, the foundation, the groundwork, the writing itself was all laid out by the creator himself. Tolkien himself put forth the history of Middle-earth. He put forth the languages, the rules for writing in the languages, for crafting new words even in these languages. He couldn't have been more specific and deliberate. And he put it out there and even expressed his wishes. He did this for us, for the fans, so anybody could pick up the thread, could get excited and inspired to go somewhere in Middle-earth and write their own tale, their own adventure, their own unexpected journey. That's not what Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne have chosen to do. Instead, they've just chosen to take those 2,000 years of the Second Age. They could have gone anywhere they wanted in it. Instead, they're just going to do all of it. They're going to retell all of it. They're going to retell it in one generation. They're going to condense thousands of years into one generation. That'd be like if I'm sitting there going, you know what? I'm going to tell the historical founding of America, and I'm going to do it starting with Jesus Christ, going through Christopher Columbus and George Washington, and yeah, they're all going to hang out together. They're all just going to be alive together, hanging out. Oh, and by the way, George Washington is George Bush's dad, because that totally makes sense. He's not from like a way, way, way future era. More on that in a second. That's a very specific reference right here. But this brings us to our second point of why this is so disrespectful to the creator, to the fans, to anybody who wanted to see a Lord of the Rings show, because that's not what this is. This is two people thinking that they are better than the person who made this, that they somehow can do this better than literally one of the greatest writers who ever lived. That's this culture of disrespect we're living in. You saw that with Star Wars, with the way it was wrested away with George Lucas, and the way people act like, oh, anything we do is better than his vision, as if the fact that he was the one who created the entire universe means literally nothing. The way people want to cancel J.K. Rowling but still praise Harry Potter left, right, and center. As if you can disassociate the two. And that's exactly what they're trying to do here. Acting like somehow Lord of the Rings belongs to all of us. It belongs to the Hufflepuffs and the blue hairs and the pink teeths of the world and the whatever the fuck you're fucking in the bedrooms. Because that's all that matters for identity. It's who you're putting your dick in, which is why we're going to make sure we explore a lot of romance and sex in the Lord of the Rings TV show, because even though Tolkien never put an emphasis on that in his world ever at all, it's so important to our identity. That's what this show is. That's who this show is for. And back to the point I made about George Washington being George Bush's dad. Yeah, that's something they're doing. That's this little fun thing they're doing in the show. Durin III, he is a dwarf king. He is the king who received one of the dwarven rings of power back in the Second Age when Sauron founded them, and then, went on his campaign to slowly take over all of Middle Earth. And this ends with this war that ends the Third Age, and we go on thousands of years deep into the Third Age, and we get the hobbits in the Shire, and we get the events of the Hobbit, and somewhere just before the events of the Hobbit, or maybe around concurrently with them, you've got Durin IV. Durin IV is the king of Khazad-dûm at this time. The kingdom in Moria, the Dwarven kingdom in Moria, he is the one who is the king when they dig too deep, when they uncover the Balrog. He falls victim to the Balrog, and then later on Balin tries to start a colony there, etc. But that's later, that's blah. So yes, Durin III, Durin IV, separated by thousands of years of history. Thousands, and dwarfs live a long time, but not that fucking long. And why is this a problem? You say, well, just get over it. People do that with characters all the time. They change their backstory, their origin. They move around in time. It's not a big deal. Just get over it. Yeah, but why? There's literally no reason to do this unless you're sitting here trying to say, oh, well, we're going to rewrite it for the sake of, again, unless you're actively just being disrespectful, like, I'm just going to rewrite this for the sake of rewriting it because I'm better than you and I have the right to rewrite your work, which is just why. That's just shitty. Why are you adapting this work if you don't respect the source material to begin with? That's one possibility. The other possibility I thought of was, like, maybe they started writing the script and they got as far as reading who Durin III was and just wrote Durin IV in as his son because they assumed that's how it worked and didn't think they had to read any deeper. And, when people started calling them out on that being incorrect, they were like, oh, don't worry about it, guys. It just is what it is. Or maybe they made an active decision to make Durin IV the son of Durin III because maybe they just felt like their audiences weren't smart enough to handle, having just a randomly named dwarven character that they don't already have a point of reference for. Because the thing is, you barely have a point of reference for Durin IV. He doesn't have a character arc anywhere in the stories. He doesn't show up. I don't even think he's there in person, in flesh, anywhere. So what value do you get from pulling him out of his timeline, of his fucking family tree that Tolkien took the time to write out for you in the appendices? Why are you plucking him out of there and putting him into another part of history when he's just an unknown character? You can literally invent any character you want, name him anything you want, and have the exact traits you were going to put on Durin IV and just not make a choice that breaks canon. So you're either just being an asshole or you're pandering to stupid people. And either way, this doesn't have a place in Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, I'm sorry, it's just not for stupid people. If you want stupid fantasy, watch literally any other fantasy. But don't put this shit, make any other fantasy. But don't put this shit in Lord of the Rings. At least understand what you're working with. But they don't have to do that. They don't have to, because Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne, no, they're here on a mission from God. At least that's how these two self-proclaimed God-fearing individuals seem to act, to the point where, according to Vanity Fair, they have even lifted passages straight from the Bible itself to stick them into their new show. I find this hilarious. I find this really, and not just for the surface reason, the surface most obvious reason, which is like, yo, you guys think you're so fucking smart. J.D. Payne bragging about, I studied Shakespeare at Yale, and yet you can't even write dialogue yourself that would fit into Tolkien's universe? Really? You had to borrow from the Bible? Good job. Especially, and here's where it gets funnier. Here's where it gets funnier, right? Because you have so much material to draw from, right? So many things. You could have gone to Norse mythology. You could have gone to Old English writing. Two things very famously that Tolkien himself drew upon for inspiration, because even the greats are inspired. He has nuggets of those stories, of those threads, of those languages, of the bases, the roots for the languages that he himself creates. It's all there. You have that. You have so many references to deep human universal conditions, and of course the parallels to the Great Wars, which many people foolishly tried to reduce the Lord of the Rings to simply being an allegory for, which it's not. But Tolkien himself, again, you don't have to take my word for it. Literally, Tolkien himself said that's not all it is. It's foolish and reductive to reduce my work. They didn't say that literally, but he said essentially, don't reduce my work to being a simple allegory of that. He also probably would have said something like, don't inject biblical allegory, because famously one of the rich texts that he did not draw upon for the Lord of the Rings was the Bible. And I suspect, now this I cannot necessarily confirm unless he wrote about it somewhere that I don't particularly remember. I suspect that the reason that Tolkien left religion as an overt element out of his writing, of his texts, because he already handled what religion does in fantasy. It brings an element of tribalism in. He already had that handled with his different races and species. If you want your biblical imagery, you've got it in C.S. Lewis. Go there, chock full, deep down in center. It's all through there. It's a beautiful place for it, but it's not in Tolkien. Tolkien handled his messaging and allegory using different focal points. That wasn't one of the ones that interested him. And I think in his mind, layering religion on top of the different classes and races that he'd already created would be like putting a hat on a hat. It would just muddle the message and confuse things. Oh, I don't know, kind of like when you add modern concepts of race and skin color onto those pre-existing species and classes that are already existing in the world as your allegory for racism. That's the thing that the Rings of Power show is doing, by the way, in case you didn't pick up on that. But let's see what else. Let's see what else you guys have got for us. Let's see in what other ways Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne could possibly let us down now. Because J.D. Payne, no, he didn't just study Shakespearean poetry at Yale. He also studied, the quote from that, studied Hebrew poetry and parallelism and inverted parallelism and chiasmus, which sounds really, really impressive unless you're me, in which case, I happen to study, Latin poetry in high school, jackass. And what you just said basically sounds like I studied poetry, and so I understand metaphors and simile and alliteration and fancy kinds of alliteration. Because that's all you just said. You're just naming literary devices, and we'll get to why that's extra funny in just a minute. But first, for those who aren't aware how simple and bullshit this stuff is, he's trying to say these things so they sound fancy, they sound intelligent. You know what parallelism is? If you didn't already know what parallelism is, it's just the act of lining up two clauses next to each other that have a parallel between them. For example, just as Patrick McKay lacks the talent to craft an intelligent narrative, so does J.D. Payne lack the brain cells to do justice to J.R.R. Tolkien. That's parallelism. We line up similar subjects, we talk about what they're lacking. Intelligence and talent in both of these cases, right? Inverted parallelism would be to reverse the expectation from one clause to another. As Tolkien was a wizard with words, so J.D. Payne is a fool. That's inverted parallelism, right? You reverse the expectation from the first to the second. Now, chiasmus is a fancy version of inverted parallelism. Chiasmus is this fancy rhetorical device that you can find in a number of places. This super highbrow, fancy rhetorical device that you can just, pick out in everyday speech here, there, everywhere, all sorts of movies and text. There's one movie, though, that I can't actually think of a really strong example of chiasmus from. Oh, it's Lord of the Rings. Yeah, it's Lord of the Rings. Here's a movie that I can think of a strong example of chiasmus from. Really great highbrow choice. Mean Girls. Mean Girls. Here's an example of chiasmus from Mean Girls. I don't hate you because you're fat. You're fat because I hate you. That's chiasmus. And so using that makes you worthy of Tolkien, well, sign me and my fucking cats up. Because literally chiasmus, that word is just a fancy Greek word. The origin is an X. And the whole reason all it means is that if you take that version of inverted parallelism, right, fat because I hate you because fat, and you stack them on top of each other and you drew a line between the words hate and fat, it would make an X. Oh my God, it's so fancy. Where are these things important? Where do they matter? In rhetoric, in poetry, where these flashy devices, these visual puns that exist in your wordplay, you only have time to grasp them in shorter forms, in shorter pieces. Rhetoric, where even if you go longer form, is broken down into shorter, more lyrical bits at a time to make it easier to digest for your audience. Poetry, of course, notoriously broken down into specific metered verses. Things like parallelism and chiasmus work much better in this type of writing. Tolkien wrote prose. Really not a poet. Didn't really do a lot of poetry. Not really his thing. He wrote prose. And while I'm sure you could find an example of parallelism or inverted parallelism somewhere in his work, they don't really show up that often because prosaic writers like Tolkien, who are very prosaic, they have other literary devices, ones that are more geared, like extended metaphors, that are more geared towards their style of writing, towards the narratives that they are crafting, and are less, and where stuffing all of these rhetorical elements that you find in poetry become trite if you were to throw them in one after another. But I guess J.D. Payne didn't learn that at Yale. No, he just learned and hero meter. Oh, he learned all about hero meter because that's his next point of pride. That's his next try. All right, line him up, J.D. Payne. Well, we took some of our heroes and we made up our own hero meters. So some speak in iams, and some speak in trochees, and some speak in dactyls. Oh my god. Wow, it's just so impressive. Well, let's stop for a second, because you didn't invent any hero meters. You didn't. There are specific hero meters, and they are for specific languages. For example, the classical languages, dactylic hexameter. That's the heroic meter. That's the heroic meter. There's one heroic meter for the classics, it's dactylic hexameter. For English, it's iambic pentameter. That was Shakespeare's meter. That's what he used. And those other ones you can't just utilize, you can't just drive and pull them as fucking Virgil himself discovered, because really dactylic hexameter was well suited for Greek. It didn't even work that great in Latin. The Romans just had this thing where they thought that copying plagiarism was essentially the highest form of flattery, so they're like, well, if the Greeks used that as their heroic meter, then we have to too. But each meter is specifically crafted because it works the best with the language that it's used for. So if you're going around grabbing meters from other languages and shoving them into English, your characters are going to talk like fucking retards. As it is, they're already going to talk like fucking retards, because apparently you're going to have a bunch of them just talking in iams. That's Shakespeare's heroic meter. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks. Now hold on, because I actually am lying to you. He didn't tell you any meters. He said iams, trochees, and dactyls. None of those are meters. Those are feet, right? Those are the pieces, the phrases that make up a meter. If a meter is a sentence, a foot is a word or a clause within that sentence. So a meter would be iambic pentameter. It actually tells you how many of those feet go into one. But his characters, I guess, are just going to run on and on and on and talk like this all the fucking time. Because if you're a hero, it speaks only in iambic pentameter. That's literally how they are going to talk the whole fucking time. Even Shakespeare didn't keep it up. But soft with light through on yonder window breaks. It is the east and Juliet is the sun. Literally the next line, he breaks verse. Because it doesn't work for a character to only speak in iams. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't sound right. Same thing with dactyls or trochees. They're just other ones. A trochee is a da-da. So the opposite of an iam, a dactyl is a da-da-da. So you have characters that just walk around going da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's great. That's great. You got all that sing-songy bullshit in there, but this ain't fucking Les Mis. This is Tolkien, so show some goddamn respect. But you guys don't know how to do that. Because you didn't take the edict that Tolkien left for you. You didn't pick up a thread somewhere in his universe, somewhere in one of his references, his things that little nuggets that he left for you to pick up and run with. You didn't do that. You took his work. You literally said in this interview, "Oh yeah, we connected the dots and we feel like we wrote the novel that Tolkien never wrote about the Second Age." He did. He fucking wrote it, guys. It's called The Silmarillion. It's very long. And if you think that there's a major element that he left out of there that he meant to have in there, where are you getting this information from? I'm pretty certain that Tolkien included all of the major elements that he wanted to in the Silmarillion. I'm pretty sure he had the room for that, guys. You just don't care. You just don't want to read it. You just want to assume that something that comes out of your asshole is better than what the greatest writer, in my opinion, who ever lived was able to do. So congratulations, because all you've accomplished is not demonstrating anything that you are capable of carrying this torch, that you're capable of crafting a story in this world. All you've demonstrated is your own hubris. Your own hubris that you somehow think you have the right, the edict, to go into somebody else's creation and tell them, essentially, and everybody who's ever loved it, that all this is wrong. This is wrong. This is bad. Why? Because you say so? Because Jeff Bezos said this is what's going to make you money? Sorry, guys. This is the hill I fucking die on. This is garbage. This is unacceptable. And I will continue to speak out against it as long as this shit is happening. And no, I will not watch a second of the show. And I don't have to in this case. I don't have to give it a shot. Because I know already in what they've outwardly stated I already know the ways in which they're disrespecting the lore, the way they're disrespecting the canon, and why would I subject myself to that? You guys make your own decisions. Let me know if you love it or hate it, whatever, however you feel about it. But don't accept less than what you yourself know you should be given. That's what I gotta say. So if you liked hearing that, you know where to find me. I'm streaming on 17 Live more often than not. We're on Discord. We're having so much fun there. YouTube is like my tertiary platform now. It fucking sucks. I hate it. Get off of it with me. And until next time, guys, God Empress out.